The sun rose over the savannah, casting golden light across the dry grasslands. Birds chirped in the acacia trees, and the distant hum of life stirred in the villages of Umoja and Kivuli. The two villages, separated by a narrow strip of land, had coexisted for generations, sharing the waters of the Mto Miku River, which snaked through the valley like a lifeline. But this year, the rains had been scarce, and the river's flow had dwindled to a trickle. Tension simmered like a pot left too long on the fire. In Umoja, the villagers gathered under the baobab tree, their faces etched with worry. Chief Adebayo, a tall man with a deep voice and a commanding presence, addressed his people. "The river is our lifeblood," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Without it, our crops will wither and our cattle will perish. We cannot allow Kivuli to take more than their share." Meanwhile, in Kivuli, the mood was equally grim. Elder Nia, a wise woman with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages, stood before her people. "The river is a gift from our ancestors," she said. "But Umoja's greed threatens to leave us with nothing. We must stand firm." The disputes escalated quickly. Young men from both villages began to clash at the riverbank, hurling insults and stones. The once peaceful valley echoed with shouts and the cries of the wounded. It seemed as though the bond between the villages forged over generations would be shattered forever. But in the midst of the chaos, one voice called for calm. His name was Chibueze, an elder from a neighboring village who was known far and wide for his wisdom and ability to mediate conflicts. Chibueze had heard of the disputes and traveled to the valley, his walking stick tapping against the dry earth as he approached. Chibueze was an old man, his hair white as the clouds, but his spirit was strong. He carried with him a small calabash filled with honey, a symbol of peace and sweetness. When he arrived at the riverbank, he found the young men from both villages glaring at each other, their fists clenched. "Children of the earth," Chibueze called out, his voice steady and calm. "Why do you fight over the river that has nourished your families for generations? Do you not see that your anger is like a fire that consumes everything in its path?" The young men hesitated, their eyes shifting from Chibueze to each other. Slowly, they lowered their weapons. Chibueze nodded and turned to the village elders. "Chief Adebayo, Elder Nia, I ask that you gather your people. Let us speak under the baobab tree where our ancestors once sat in council." That evening, the villagers of Umoja and Kivuli gathered under the great baobab tree, its branches stretching wide like the arms of a mother embracing her children. Chibueze sat at the center, his calabash of honey placed before him. He began by pouring a small amount of honey onto the ground, a gesture of respect to the ancestors. "The river is not just water," Chibueze began. "It is life. It is the blood that flows through the land, connecting us all. But when we fight over it, we forget that we are connected. We forget that what harms one village harms us all." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Then he turned to Chief Adebayo. "Tell me, Chief, what does Umoja need to survive?" Chief Adebayo cleared his throat. "We need enough water for our crops and our cattle. Without it, we cannot feed our families." Chibueze nodded and turned to Elder Nia. "And you, Elder Nia, what does Kivuli need?" "We need the same," she replied. "But Umoja's dam upstream leaves us with barely enough to drink." Chibueze listened carefully, his eyes moving between the two leaders. Then he smiled. There is a saying among my people. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. If you continue to fight, the river will dry up and both villages will suffer. But if you work together, you can find a way to share its waters. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small wooden bowl. This bowl, he said, is like the river. If I pour water into it, it will fill to the brim. But if I try to take more than my share, it will spill, and there will be nothing left for anyone. Chibueze poured water from his gourd into the bowl, demonstrating how it could be shared without waste. The villagers watched in silence, their anger giving way to understanding. Over the next few days, Chibueze worked with the villagers to devise a plan. They agreed to build a new dam upstream, one that would allow water to flow evenly to both villages. They also decided to rotate the days on which each village could draw water, ensuring that everyone had enough. The young men who had once fought now worked side by side, their differences forgotten. Chief Adebayo and Elder Nia exchanged gifts, a sign of their renewed friendship. The once dry riverbed began to fill again, its waters flowing freely as a symbol of unity and cooperation. As the sun set on the final day of the council, Chibueze stood before the villagers once more. "You have shown great wisdom," he said. "By choosing peace over conflict, you have honored your ancestors and ensured a future for your children. Remember this lesson, for it is not just about water. It is about how we live together as one people." The villagers cheered, their voices rising into the night sky. The young men who had once fought now clasped hands, their differences forgotten. Chief Adebayo and Elder Nia exchanged gifts, a sign of their renewed friendship. As Chibueze prepared to leave, a young girl from Umoja approached him, holding a small basket of fruit. "Thank you, Elder," she said. "You have brought peace to our valley." Chibueze smiled and placed a hand on her head. "Peace is not something I bring," he said. "It is something that lives within each of you. All I did was remind you of its power." And with that, Chibueze walked away, his figure disappearing into the horizon. The villages of Umoja and Kivuli thrived, their bond stronger than ever. And the Mintomku River flowed on, a symbol of life, unity, and the enduring power of peace. The villagers never forgot the lesson they had learned, and they passed it down to their children and grandchildren. The story of Chibueze, the Peacemaker, became a legend, told and retold under the baobab tree for generations to come. The years passed, and the villages prospered. The river continued to flow, its waters shared equally by Umoja and Kivuli. The young men who had once fought now stood as elders, teaching their children the importance of cooperation and understanding. The baobab tree, under which the Great Council had been held, became a sacred place, a symbol of unity and peace. Every year, the villagers gathered under its branches to celebrate their shared heritage and to honor the memory of Chibueze. They poured honey onto the ground, a gesture of respect to the ancestors, and gave thanks for the wisdom that had saved their villages. One day, a traveler arrived in the valley, seeking shelter for the night. He was welcomed with open arms, as was the custom of the villagers. As he sat under the baobab tree, he listened to the story of Chibueze and the river dispute. "This is a powerful tale," the traveler said. "It reminds us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding." The villagers nodded in agreement, their hearts filled with pride. They knew that the lesson of Chibueze was not just for them, but for all people, everywhere. And as the traveler continued on his journey, he carried the story with him, spreading its message of hope and unity to all who would listen. And so, the story of the river dispute and the peacemaker lived on, a testament to the power of wisdom, compassion, and the enduring spirit of humanity. The villages of Umoja and Kivuli remained united, their bond unbreakable. The Minto Miku River flowed on, its waters a reminder of the life that connects us all. And under the great baobab tree, the villagers gathered, their voices rising in song, celebrating the peace that had been won through understanding and love. The legacy of Chibueze, the peacemaker, endured, a beacon of hope in a world that so often forgets the value of unity. And in the hearts of the villagers, the river flowed on, forever, a symbol of life, love, and the enduring power of peace.